On this episode of the podcast, I'm going to be talking about how you can get yourself into great shape to run really well off the bike and perform really well in your upcoming races. But it might not be the advice that you think you're going to get. Okay, so let's jump right into this. It's really common when an athlete who's new to triathlon comes to me for coaching. They'll come to me and they'll say, right, I've read all about these sessions called brick runs. It's going to involve running really hard off the bike, biking really hard, and then going for a really hard run. And I've been told they're absolutely hideous. And I can't wait for you to smash me with these sessions, coach. And I always reply to the athlete, right, okay, hang on, let's take a step back here. Let's work out what we really want. From a coaching point of view, I don't want any of my athletes experiencing anything approaching what they'd consider being smashed or having a hideous experience in training. What we want in our training sessions is the kind of session that's going to replicate what you're going to experience on race day. So that's the first thing I want our athletes taking in. We're going to approach running off the bike in a way that mimics the experience you're going to have on race day if we get things right. So there's no question that running after cycling straight away is going to be a very strange feeling the first time that you do it. But with the correct sessions and the correct training, it might not always be that way. And in fact, hopefully it won't always be that way. After a few minutes, you'll find you can have a really effective and good run off the bike without ever having to experience the kind of session that people talk about where you end up destroyed. So first up, let's talk about brick runs, what they are and what's the purpose of them. Obviously, in a triathlon or a duathlon, you're going to have to come into transition after a bike leg, park your bike shoes off, run shoes on, and get going as quickly as possible. And it's no surprise that your legs feel quite strange when you start to run straight after having done a bike session. So the key thing that I want people taking away from this is if we can train you mentally to what to expect here, physically, it's going to be much easier to take what's going to happen. So this is the first thing. The purpose of the brick run session is much more mental than it is physical, especially in the early days. And we can typically expect our legs to feel very tired, very wobbly. Sometimes people experience the sensation of thinking, there's no way I'm going to be able to run having just biked like this. There's no way it's going to be possible. The purpose of the brick session is to allow those mental thoughts to happen, to have those thoughts of, oh, my legs feel absolutely terrible, but to counter those with other thoughts. So you gradually tell yourself, there is a way through this. I've experienced this before. I know my legs will come back. And typically in 2 to 4 minutes of any run off the bike, you'll find that your legs go back to feeling normal. Now that's the good news. The bad news is that 2 to 4 minutes can feel an awfully long time, especially in training. So that's the purpose of us doing these brick runs. It's so that mentally, first and foremost, we experience that feeling of really strange, uncomfortable, tired legs. But then we experience the mental negotiation with that voice in our head saying, you're not going to be able to do this. This feels horrible. You've got to negotiate back and say, I know this feeling is going to end soon. I know it only lasts a few minutes. I've got practice doing this in training where my legs have come back. My legs will come back to me. And at that point, I'm in a position to have a really, really good run. So that's the first thing I want you to expect. Expect it to feel slightly weird and strange, but expect that you're going to get through it and know that the purpose of it is as much mental as it is physical in terms of getting you ready for the sensation and knowing that you're going to get through it. Because lots of cases of athletes who get off the bike, start to run and convince themselves that they're just not going to be able to do it today and stop on race day. They have a walk, they let that voice in their head control them that's saying to them, you just can't do this. So I don't want that for you. I want you to experience, well, you're going to experience the sensation regardless, but I want you to have this other side of the conversation ready to go so that you know you're going to be all right in 2 to 4 minutes time and you know you're going to be able to run well off the bike. Okay, so let's talk about what brick sessions are actually going to look like. With our athletes, typically, we look at introducing brick runs about 6 weeks before our first big triathlon or duathlon of the season. It's about 6 weeks out. The first brick run session is nothing more than just experiencing that feeling either for the first time or for the first time this year. Typically, it's 10 minutes long. It doesn't matter how fast or slow you run. I ask athletes to make it quite slow and steady, and it's all about that mental negotiation. So just 10 minutes off the bike at an easy pace. And then we'll gradually build up. We'll go to 15 minutes the week after. And again, 15 minutes tends to be the point where for 2 to 4 minutes, you feel awful. And then that's 10 decent minutes of running where you feel really confident and you come back full of the knowledge that you are going to be able to run well off the bike. Now, from that point forward, you can mentally be quite confident that this is going to be your experience every time. And we can start to increase the duration of some of these runs, and the purpose becomes more physical than mental at this point. You're going to know what to expect. So let's start to increase the duration. So what does that look like? Typically, for our sprint and Olympic distance athletes, I won't have them run more than 15 or 20 minutes off the bike. And as race day approaches, certainly with athletes who are more concerned with their race event, who want to go faster, who want to perform closer to their ultimate racing ability, if you like, we'll gradually increase the pace of these to more and more closely match what race day pace is going to look like for that athlete. But in the early days, like I've said, the first couple of these are going to be just really easy runs off the bike. For 70.3 athletes, we're going to extend this to a maximum length of 45 minutes. And the same for Ironman athletes. We're going to extend it to a maximum length of 45 minutes off the bike. The reason for this is the kind of fatigue that you get after biking is very different to the kind of fatigue you're going to get on race day. So we want to limit the amount of fatigue that you carry and the muscle damage that you carry in training so you can train again in the next week. So we are going to limit the length of those long runs. Now, that's quite a controversial view in triathlon. There are some coaches who you'll see are giving people very, very long runs off the bike. I don't do that. I've got tons of evidence of athletes we've coached over the years who've thrived not by doing that. And the way around this is we limit the longest run off the bike to 45 minutes. And then certain times in the training plan, we will have what we call a race simulation weekend. And very first thing the next morning, the athlete is going to do another run. So we end up with either a broken 70.3 or a broken Ironman across the weekend. So just the 45 minutes is more than enough for athletes to run off the bike. And that goes for even my very fastest athletes, the ones who qualify for Kona. I'll never have them run more than 45 minutes off the bike. And I think that's the key here. The closer that you get to race day, the closer we want to try and mimic the pace you'll be running off the bike in a best case scenario. So we've talked about sprint and Olympic athletes already. At the 70.3 distance, we're typically going to be shooting for a best case scenario for our very fastest athletes of about M pace or marathon pace on Jack Daniel's pace calculator. That gives you a really good lead to what's going to be reasonable. And often people don't like to hear that. They don't like to be given there's a limitation on this. That's really not what it's there for. It's not to be a limitation. It's there to say the best athletes we've seen have managed to run the entire half marathon at M pace. So there's no point running any faster than that in training if that's the fastest you're going to be able to deliver come race day, okay? With our Ironman athletes, we don't even let them go that fast. We limit it to E-pace. And just the act of running off the bike is going to be enough to get you ready to run off the bike come race day. So if you're an Ironman athlete, I implore you, really resist the temptation to make your run off the bike harder than your best case scenario run off the bike in training. Now, what can you get as a lead as to what your best case scenario will be? Well, for most people, if you've done one before, use your previous best Ironman run result as the cap on your pace. You can't go any faster than that. If you want to train faster, prove it by racing faster. It's going to limit the damage you can do to yourself in training. For people who are doing it first time, I'm going to limit you to the very top end of your E-pace. And honestly, for most athletes, if you run the middle of your E-pace zone on the Jack Daniel's pace calculator, you're doing a fantastic job. It is only the very fastest age groupers who I see able to run at the top end of their E-pace off the bike on race day. Now, again, there's a certain amount of realism needed here from people. And sometimes athletes don't like that. Sometimes a certain percentage of athletes like to dream. They like to believe that they are capable of running 2:35 marathon off the bike, just like the athlete they've seen on TV. You are not going to run the same pace off the bike in an Ironman as you've run in your open Ironman. And as a rough rule of thumb, I'd say there's about a 30-minute delta. If you're a 3-hour flat Ironman runner, you can be looking to run about 3:30 off the bike. If you're a 4-hour flat Ironman runner, sorry, a 4-hour flat marathon runner, you can expect to be running 4:40 to 4:45 off the bike. There's about that much of a delta between the two. So there's no point in you running faster in training than that. All you're doing is training at a different gait to what you're going to be racing at come race day. So in summary then, the brick runs that we'll have you do are of a very specific purpose. They're going to be much shorter than most people use and most coaches prescribe. And they're going to be for a very specific purpose of getting your mind used to the idea that you are going to be able to run well again off the bike, much, much more so than the physical reason for doing the run itself. We're really going to steer you away from doing any long runs off the bike, and certainly nothing longer than 45 minutes off the bike. Okay, then. That brings us to the end of this week's episode. So here are some discount codes and deals for you. Over at precisionfuelandhydration.com, use the code OXYGEN24 for 15% off your first electrolyte order. And over at teamoxygenaddict.com, I think we've got the most comprehensive triathlon coaching program for busy age groupers. If you've enjoyed what you've heard today and the advice has helped you out, well, great stuff. I hope that's helped put some of your fears at rest. And I know from some of the calls we've had, it's helping raise the right questions in the minds of people as to whether their current coaching relationship is working for them. If you're looking for a change, or if you're looking for high quality, proven coaching for Ironman or 70.3 triathlon this year, you can just check out the details of our coaching packages on our website at teamoxygenaddict.com. And then if you're interested, there's a link in the show notes below. You can join our waiting list and you'll be notified if a slot becomes available. And at that point, you'll have a chance to book a call with us and see if you'd be a good fit for joining the team. So although we don't have slots available at the moment, we'll make those call appointments available to people as and when we do have athletes who end their coaching packages during the season, if and when that happens. So remember, there's links in the show notes, so you don't have to remember them. Till next week, have a great, safe training and racing week. I'm Coach Rob Wilby, and you've been listening to the Oxygen Addict podcast. See ya.